Hello, and welcome back to Sleepy Science. Tonight, we are going somewhere quite different from the usual places science takes us. No telescopes pointed at the sky, no microscopes peering into cells, no equations written on whiteboards in cold, bright rooms. Tonight, we are going to the water's edge. We are going to sit very quietly, beside a slow, dark stream in the middle of a forest in Australia, where the trees lean over the surface, and the air smells like damp earth and eucalyptus, and where something extraordinary is about to glide out from the bank and slip beneath the water without making a single sound. The platypus. Of all the creatures that walk and swim and breathe on this earth, very few have inspired quite as much wonder, quite as much delighted confusion, and quite as many letters of disbelief as this small, quiet, extraordinary animal. It is an animal that seems to have been assembled from the leftover pieces of other creatures. A bill like a duck, a body like an otter, a tail like a beaver, venom like a snake, eggs like a reptile. And yet somehow it is none of those things. It is entirely, completely, perfectly itself. There is something deeply calming about the platypus. Once you spend a little time with it, it does not hurry. It does not make noise. It slips through the world at its own pace, spending its days tucked inside a burrow dug into the riverbank, and its nights gliding through dark water, hunting by senses we barely understand, in rivers that have been running through those same valleys for millions upon millions of years. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the world of science, I invite you to like and subscribe, or leave a small thought in the comments below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you have to do is close your eyes, let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting, and allow the slow, gentle world of the platypus to carry you quietly into sleep. Let us begin. The platypus is one of the oldest surviving lineages of mammals on Earth. When we think about ancient things, we often think of mountains, or oceans, or perhaps the stars overhead. But life itself has ancient lineages, family lines that stretch back so far into the past that the landscape they were born into looked nothing like the world we know today. The platypus is one of those lineages. The group it belongs to, the Monotremes, branched away from the rest of the mammal family tree somewhere around 160 to 180 million years ago. Let that settle for a moment. 180 million years ago, the continents were still joined together in great, slow collisions. Dinosaurs were walking across land that would one day become Antarctica, and the first tiny mammals were barely beginning to find their footing in a world dominated by enormous reptiles. And somewhere in that world, the ancestors of the platypus were already quietly going their own way. What is remarkable is that they survived, not by becoming faster, or bigger, or more aggressive, or more dominant. They survived by being exactly what they were. Small, secretive, deeply tuned to their particular rivers and streams, following their own quiet strategy through every great extinction, every shifting continent, every ice age and warming period that came and went across the long story of this planet. The platypus did not need to change very much, because what it was already doing worked. There is something almost meditative about that. In a world that often prizes adaptation and transformation and progress, the platypus simply continued. Steady, unhurried, present in its river, doing what it had always done, while the world transformed around it. When European scientists first received a platypus specimen, they thought it was a hoax. In 1799, a dried skin of an unknown animal arrived in England from the newly explored shores of Australia. The naturalist George Shaw received it, carefully examined it, and then did something that speaks beautifully to the limits of even the most educated assumptions. He reached for his scissors. Shaw was convinced that someone had sewn a duck's bill onto the body of a beaver-like creature as a joke. He searched the specimen carefully for stitches, for seams, for any sign of deliberate trickery. He found none. The bill was real. The feet were real. The tail was real. All of it was real. And yet, he still struggled to believe it. His published description of the animal contained a note that it was nearly impossible not to suspect that the specimen had been prepared by artificial means. It is one of those lovely moments in the history of science, when the world simply refused to fit inside the box that had been built for it. The platypus did not care about European taxonomies, or the categories that naturalists had so carefully assembled, or the rules about which features could possibly exist together in one animal. It simply was what it was. And it took the scientific world the better part of a century to begin to understand just what that was. In the decades that followed, the debates that swirled around the platypus were fierce and long. Did it lay eggs? Early observers reported that it did, but many prominent scientists refused to accept this. A mammal that laid eggs was a contradiction, an impossibility, a category error. The arguments went back and forth across scientific journals for years. It was not until 1884 that the question was finally settled, when the naturalist William Caldwell sent a now famous telegram to a scientific meeting in Britain. The message was just 4 words long. Monotremes oviparous, ovum meriblastic, which meant, in the language of the day, that yes, the platypus lays eggs, and furthermore, those eggs divide in a way more similar to reptile eggs than to most mammal development. The meeting reportedly erupted. The platypus, once again, had refused to behave the way anyone expected. The platypus uses electroreception to find its prey in total darkness. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine swimming in a dark river at night. No light reaching through the water. No landmarks visible. No sound that helps you find a shrimp or a worm or a small crayfish tucked beneath a stone. For most animals, this would be a problem. For the platypus, it is simply Tuesday. The bill of a platypus is not just a strange-looking snout. It is one of the most sophisticated sensory organs ever to evolve on this planet. Packed inside that soft, rubbery, slightly flattened surface are tens of thousands of sensory receptors. Some of them detect touch, which is useful in the way that touch is always useful. But the ones that make the platypus truly extraordinary are the electroreceptors. These cells can detect the tiny electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of living animals. Every creature that moves generates a tiny electrical signal, a faint pulse that ripples outward into the water around it. Most animals cannot detect these signals. The platypus not only can, but has tuned its entire hunting strategy around them. When a platypus dives, it closes its eyes, its ears, and its nostrils. It shuts out every conventional sense and navigates entirely through the electrical and mechanical information arriving at its bill. It sweeps its head slowly from side to side as it moves through the water, like a very slow and very deliberate metronome, triangulating the source of electrical signals from multiple directions at once. When it finds a signal strong enough, it closes in, pushing through mud and stones with that sensitive bill until it finds what it is looking for. It eats everything it catches in its cheek pouches, because the platypus has no stomach in the conventional sense. Food passes from its esophagus directly into the intestine. The platypus does not have teeth as an adult. It grinds its food with hardened pads inside its bill instead. All of this happens in darkness, in cold water, in silence, guided entirely by a sense that most of the rest of the animal kingdom does not even possess. The platypus shares this electroreceptive ability with very few other animals. Sharks and rays can sense electrical fields. Some species of electric fish can too. But among mammals, the platypus is almost uniquely gifted in this way. Its closest relative, the echidna, has some electroreceptors as well, but far fewer and arranged differently. The platypus evolved this extraordinary sense on its own path, finding a solution to the problem of hunting in dark water that no mammal before or since has matched. The platypus is one of only a few venomous mammals in the world. Here is something that surprises many people. The platypus is venomous. The males carry a spur on each of their hind ankles, connected by a small duct to a venom gland called the crural gland, located in the upper thigh. This spur can deliver venom, and the venom is remarkable. It will not kill a human being, though the pain it produces is famously severe. People who have been envenomated describe the pain as immediate and intense, something far out of proportion to the small size of the animal delivering it. The pain does not respond well to standard pain relief medication. It can persist for days, sometimes weeks, and in some cases, a lasting sensitivity in the affected limb can linger for months. The venom itself is chemically complex. It contains proteins that are unique to the platypus, proteins that have no direct equivalent in the venom of any other animal. Some of these proteins lower blood pressure. Others cause blood vessels to dilate. Others produce pain through mechanisms that are still not entirely understood. What makes the platypus venom especially interesting to scientists is not just its contents, but its timing. The venom glands become most active during the breeding season, which strongly suggests that the spur is used primarily in competition between males during disputes over territory or mates, rather than as a hunting weapon or a defense against predators. The females have a small bony remnant where the spur would develop, but it degrades by the time they reach adulthood. The venom is entirely a male feature. Among mammals, venomous species are extremely rare. A handful of shrews can inject mild toxins through their saliva. The slow loris, a primate, produces a toxin from a gland near its elbow. But the platypus is the most notable venomous mammal, and it remains a source of ongoing scientific interest. Researchers studying the venom have found possible applications in medicine, particularly in the development of new pain treatments, since the unusual way platypus venom triggers pain could help illuminate pathways in the nervous system that conventional research has not yet fully mapped. The platypus, as always, turns out to hold more surprises than its quiet exterior suggests. The platypus lays eggs but nurses its young with milk. This is the feature that, perhaps more than any other, made Victorian naturalists reach for their smelling salts. The platypus is a mammal. We know this. It is warm-blooded. It has fur. It nurses its young with milk. But it also lays eggs. How does this work? A female platypus, during breeding season, will typically produce 1 to 3 eggs, though 2 is the most common number. These eggs are small, leathery, and soft-shelled, roughly the size of a marble or a grape. They look quite different from the hard-shelled eggs of birds. They are more similar in texture to the eggs of reptiles. Before laying them, the female retreats into a specially constructed nesting burrow. Platypus burrows can be simple tunnels, but nesting burrows are more elaborate, sometimes extending 2 to 3 meters into the riverbank, with a sealed chamber at the end where the female will incubate her eggs. She seals the entrance with plugs of soil as she retreats deeper, creating a layered series of barriers between herself and the outside world. She incubates the eggs by curling her body around them, pressing them against a patch of skin on her abdomen, warming them with her own body heat. The incubation period lasts about 10 days, which is remarkably short compared to most egg-laying animals. When the young hatch, they are tiny and extremely underdeveloped, somewhat similar in their helplessness to the young of marsupials at birth. Their eyes are closed. They have no working bills yet. They are small enough to rest on a thumbnail. And now comes the part that truly puzzled the early naturalists. The female nurses these young with milk, but she does not have nipples. No mammal in the conventional sense nurses without nipples, and yet the platypus does exactly that. Milk seeps out through the skin of the mother's abdomen, from patches of specialized skin that are sometimes described as milk patches or areolae. The milk pools in grooves along the surface of the mother's belly, and the young lap it up from these pools, pressing their soft faces against the fur and skin. Platypus milk is rich and unusual. Like the animal that produces it, it does not follow the expected rules. It contains a unique protein, since named thrombosidin, that appears to have powerful antimicrobial properties. In a burrow without sterile conditions, where the young are vulnerable to infection, this antimicrobial milk may serve as a crucial defense. Scientists studying platypus milk have published findings suggesting that compounds within it could potentially inspire new approaches to fighting antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The young platypuses remain in the burrow for 3 to 4 months, growing and developing, nourished entirely by this seeping, pooling, extraordinary milk, before they are finally ready to emerge and swim in the river on their own. The platypus genome is a biological riddle written in chromosomes. In 2008, scientists published the first complete genome sequence of the platypus, and what they found confirmed what the animal's body had always been hinting at. The platypus is genuinely, profoundly, and structurally different from other mammals at a genetic level. Most mammals determine sex through a simple system. Females have 2 copies of a large chromosome called X. Males have 1 X and 1 smaller chromosome called Y. This is the system humans use. It is the system most other mammals use. It is, to most biologists, simply how mammalian sex determination works. The platypus has 10 sex chromosomes. Female platypuses have 10 X chromosomes. Males have 5 X chromosomes and 5 Y chromosomes. No other mammal on Earth does this. The closest comparison in the animal kingdom is found in certain insects and birds, which also use multi-chromosome sex determination systems, suggesting that the platypus sex chromosome system is an ancient one, preserved from a time before the simpler XY system became standard in most mammal lineages. The platypus genome also contains a remarkable mixture of features. Around 82% of its genes are shared with humans and other mammals, which makes sense given the shared mammalian ancestry. But it also contains genes with clear similarities to those found in birds and reptiles, including genes involved in egg production. It is as if the genome itself is a kind of archive, preserving elements from both the reptilian past and the mammalian present simultaneously. The venom genes of the platypus turned out to be especially interesting. When researchers examined them closely, they found that many of the proteins in platypus venom are encoded by genes that have counterparts in other venomous animals, including snakes, starfish, and even spiders. But the genes in the platypus genome did not come from those animals. Instead, the platypus had taken different ancestral genes shared with all vertebrates, and independently repurposed them to produce venomous compounds. This phenomenon, where evolution arrives at similar solutions through entirely different genetic pathways, is called convergent evolution. And the platypus, it turns out, is full of it. The genome also revealed something unexpected about the platypus's sense of smell. It appears to have a more sophisticated olfactory system than anyone expected for a primarily aquatic hunter, with a large number of genes devoted to detecting smells. Perhaps this serves the platypus on land, or during the times when it must navigate the surface of the water, or perhaps it speaks to a history we do not yet fully understand. The platypus genome remains an active area of research, a text that scientists return to again and again, finding new sentences they had not noticed before. Platypuses are almost entirely nocturnal and live most of their lives unseen. This is one of the reasons the platypus remained so mysterious for so long, even to the people who lived closest to it. The indigenous peoples of Australia had, of course, known the platypus for thousands upon thousands of years. It appeared in their stories and their art. They had names for it in dozens of different languages across the continent. But even to the most experienced observers, the platypus was not easy to know. It spends the daylight hours inside its burrow. The burrow is typically a tunnel dug into the bank of a river or creek, somewhere between 1 and 10 meters long, ending in a dry chamber lined with leaves and grass that the platypus carries in curled under its tail. The entrance is often just above the waterline, hidden by roots and vegetation, invisible to most passing eyes. As darkness falls, the platypus emerges. It slides into the water without drama, without sound, and disappears beneath the surface. It spends the night feeding, diving repeatedly, surfacing to breathe, consuming remarkable quantities of food relative to its body size. A platypus typically needs to eat approximately 20% of its own body weight every single night to sustain itself. It hunts insect larvae, worms, freshwater shrimp, crayfish, yabbies, and small fish, gathering all of it in its cheek pouches during dives, then surfacing to grind and swallow between dives. A single night's hunting might involve hundreds of individual dives. This rhythm, the long day in the burrow, the long night in the water, is steady and ancient. It does not vary much with season. It does not vary much with weather. The platypus follows its pattern with a quiet, unhurried consistency that has carried its lineage through epochs and eras and extinction events. Watching a platypus in the wild is an experience that requires patience and luck and stillness. Researchers who study them spend hours sitting motionless beside rivers in the dark, sometimes seeing nothing, sometimes catching just the briefest silver ripple of movement before the animal vanishes again beneath the surface. There is something about its elusiveness that feels fitting. An animal this ancient, this unusual, this quietly extraordinary, perhaps deserves to live most of its life, just out of sight. The platypus has a body temperature lower than most other mammals. Mammals are warm-blooded. This is one of the defining features of the class. The ability to generate and regulate body heat internally, independent of the temperature of the surrounding environment. Most mammals maintain a core body temperature somewhere between 36 and 38 degrees Celsius. Humans sit at about 37. The platypus runs cooler than that. Its resting body temperature is around 32 degrees Celsius. This lower temperature is thought to be a feature shared with the Monotremes' ancient ancestry, a bridge between the fully homothermic mammals and the ectothermic reptiles from which mammals ultimately evolved. The platypus is warm-blooded in the sense that it regulates its own temperature, but it does not run as hot as its mammalian cousins. What is remarkable is that this lower temperature does not seem to limit the platypus in any meaningful way. It swims in cold water, often very cold water, sometimes in mountain streams in the Australian Alps, where temperatures drop close to freezing in winter. Its dense, waterproof fur keeps it insulated, trapping a layer of warm air next to the skin even while the outer surface of the coat is wet. The fur itself is a small engineering marvel. It consists of 3 layers: fine underfur, coarser guard hairs, and an intermediate layer between the two. Together they create a coat that sheds water from the outside, while remaining dry and insulating on the inside. After a dive, a platypus squeezes through the narrower part of its burrow entrance to press the water out of its coat before settling into its dry sleeping chamber. The platypus also has large front feet with extra webbing that extends beyond the claws, which folds back when the animal is on land but spreads wide in the water for efficient paddling. It swims using its front legs primarily, using the hind legs more for steering, in a style that is efficient and almost effortless to watch. On land, the platypus walks with a slightly shuffling gait, its legs set wide on the sides of its body rather than directly beneath it, giving it the look of a creature more at home in the water. And indeed, it is. Platypuses are completely silent animals. In all the recordings ever made of platypuses in the wild, in all the research conducted on them, in all the decades of observation by biologists who have devoted their careers to understanding them, very little in the way of vocalization has ever been detected. The platypus does not call. It does not sing. It does not bark or growl or chatter or squeak. Young platypuses, very rarely, produce a faint whimpering sound when disturbed. Adults almost never make any sound at all. This silence is unusual among mammals, many of which rely heavily on vocal communication for everything from finding mates, to warning of predators, to maintaining social bonds. The platypus appears to have no need for any of this. It is a largely solitary animal. Outside of the brief mating season, platypuses spend their lives alone. Males and females do not share burrows. Parents do not raise their young together. There are no platypus groups, no herds, no packs, no flocks. Each animal maintains its own stretch of river, its own burrow, its own quiet life. Communication happens, but through means we do not fully understand. Scent may play a role. Body posture may signal something during the brief encounters between individuals. But sound, the primary channel of communication for so many of the animals we know best, seems largely absent from the platypus's world. There is a kind of peace in this. To live without the need to announce yourself, to move through the world in silence, to need no audience, to ask for nothing, to simply exist, quietly, in a dark river on a dark night. The platypus carries its own sunscreen in its fur. This is one of the more unexpected discoveries in recent platypus research. And it came, like many of the best discoveries, almost by accident. Scientists studying platypus fur under ultraviolet light discovered that the fur glows. Under visible light, platypus fur appears to be a fairly uniform brown, sometimes with lighter patches on the underside. Under ultraviolet light, the kind that causes white fabrics to glow at nightclubs or under black lights, the fur fluoresces a striking blue-green color. Biofluorescence, the ability of living tissue to absorb light of one wavelength and emit it at another, is found in a surprising number of animals. It has been documented in marine creatures, in some reptiles, in certain birds, and in amphibians. But its discovery in the platypus, a mammal, was genuinely unexpected. Before this finding, biofluorescence had been documented in only 2 other mammal species, both of them nocturnal marsupials. What does this mean for the platypus? The honest answer is that we are not entirely sure. The platypus is active at night, when ultraviolet light levels from the sun are lower, though not entirely absent. One theory is that the fluorescence may help platypuses see one another in low light conditions, perhaps during the brief social encounters of breeding season. Another possibility is that it serves as camouflage. Since some predators can see in ultraviolet ranges, the discovery also, interestingly, prompted researchers to go back and look at museum specimens of other mammals under ultraviolet light and found biofluorescence turning up in unexpected places. The flying squirrel, for example, turned out to glow a vivid pink. Science, it turns out, had simply not been asking the right questions of the right animals, under the right light. A platypus can store fat in its tail as a reserve for difficult times. The tail of the platypus is broad and flat, resembling the tail of a beaver in its general shape, though it is covered in fur rather than scale. Most people, seeing a platypus for the first time, focus on the bill. The tail tends to attract less attention. But the tail has a story of its own. The platypus stores fat in its tail. This serves as an energy reserve, a kind of biological pantry that the platypus can draw on during times when food is scarce, or during the long, energy-intensive period of incubation and nursing, when a female platypus barely leaves her burrow for weeks. The female platypus during incubation does not eat. She stays in the sealed burrow for the entire 10-day incubation period, curled around her eggs, surviving on the fat reserves stored in her tail. This is a pattern familiar from other animals that fast during reproduction. Certain seals, certain bears, certain birds. But in the platypus, concentrated in that flattened, beaver-like tail, it has its own particular elegance. The tail also helps with swimming. It does not propel the platypus in the way a fish's tail does, but it acts as a rudder and a stabilizer, helping the animal steer through the current and hold position while it searches for prey near the riverbed. There is something satisfying about an animal whose every feature, even the ones that look most strange, turns out to serve a purpose. The bill for sensing, the webbed feet for swimming, the dense fur for insulation, the flat tail for energy and navigation, the spur for defense. Nothing wasted. Nothing accidental. Each piece shaped by millions of years of living and dying and living again in the rivers of Australia. Platypuses have been recorded diving for up to 90 seconds at a time. Each dive is a small, elegant act of efficiency. The platypus enters the water smoothly, barely breaking the surface, and descends into whatever depth the river allows. Australian freshwater habitats range from deep mountain rivers to shallow, rocky highland streams, and platypuses are found across all of them, adapting their hunting behavior to whatever the water offers. An average dive lasts about 30 seconds. Long dives can reach 90 seconds or even a little beyond. During that time, the platypus is doing an extraordinary amount of work, paddling through the water, sweeping its bill across the riverbed, processing thousands of electrical and mechanical signals, stuffing prey into its cheek pouches, and doing all of it while holding its breath, in cold water, in darkness. After each dive, it surfaces briefly, takes a few breaths, and then dives again. On a typical night of foraging, it might make this cycle hundreds of times. The physiology that allows the platypus to dive like this includes a slowed heart rate during submersion, a feature shared with many diving animals. The heart rate can drop significantly during a dive, reducing the rate at which oxygen is consumed by the muscles and allowing the animal to stay under longer. Scientists studying platypus diving behavior have attached small recorders to wild platypuses to map their movements through the water in detail. The picture that emerges is of an animal moving through its environment with remarkable precision, covering a consistent section of river night after night, following the same foraging paths, returning to the same productive patches of riverbed. It is a quiet, systematic, deeply familiar life. The same river, the same dark water, the same soft searching of a bill across stone and mud. Night after night, season after season, year after year. The platypus has inspired real advances in medical science. It is perhaps not surprising, given how unusual the platypus is in almost every biological dimension, that scientists studying it have occasionally stumbled upon things with direct applications to human medicine. The most high-profile of these discoveries concerns insulin. Insulin is the hormone that regulates blood sugar in vertebrates, including humans. In people with type 2 diabetes, the regulation of blood sugar breaks down, with serious long-term health consequences. Managing this is one of the central challenges of modern medicine. It turns out that platypuses, along with echidnas, have a very unusual form of a gut hormone called GLP-1. In most animals, GLP-1 is released after eating and plays a role in signaling fullness and regulating insulin secretion. It is also quickly broken down by an enzyme in the bloodstream. In the platypus and echidna, this GLP-1 has evolved to be resistant to that enzyme, making it far more stable in the bloodstream. This stability is something researchers have been trying to engineer artificially in medications for type 2 diabetes for many years. The platypus, apparently, solved this problem naturally. The reason for this evolution in the platypus appears to be related to its diet and metabolism. The same hormonal system that regulates gut response and blood sugar also influences venom production in males. And over millions of years, the two systems appear to have influenced each other, leading to the unusual GLP-1 stability. Pharmaceutical researchers are now studying this platypus hormone as a potential model for new long-acting diabetes medications. An animal that evolved in Australian rivers, hunting underwater by electrical sense, might end up informing treatments for one of the most common chronic diseases in the modern world. This is one of the quiet arguments for preserving biodiversity. We never quite know what we will find when we look closely at the biology of the creatures around us. Platypuses can live for over 20 years in the wild. For an animal of its size, the platypus is remarkably long-lived. Most small mammals live fast and die young. A mouse lives a year or two. A rabbit, perhaps 5 to 9 years in good conditions. But a wild platypus, documented by researchers using tracking devices and careful long-term monitoring, can live to more than 20 years. In captivity, where threats are reduced and food is reliable, platypuses have lived even longer. The oldest recorded platypus in captivity lived to just over 21 years. This longevity is consistent with an animal that has a slow and steady metabolism, a cautious lifestyle centered around concealment and consistency, and very few natural predators once it is fully grown. Adult platypuses face relatively little threat from other animals. Occasionally, a large water python or a freshwater crocodile may take one. Foxes and feral cats, introduced to Australia by European settlers, pose a danger near the water's edge. Raptors may occasionally take a platypus that surfaces at dawn. But for the most part, a healthy adult platypus in a clean river has very few enemies. The greater threats it faces are not from predation, but from the slow alteration of its world. Habitat degradation, drought, pollution, invasive species, and the fragmentation of river systems by dams and weirs all take a toll on platypus populations. A platypus living in a healthy river for 20 years knows that river completely. It knows every bend, every pool, every productive patch of gravel where the larvae gather. It knows the water's rhythms through drought and flood. It has slept through thousands of dawns in its quiet burrow. It has glided through 10,000 dark nights beneath the surface of its home. That is a life built not on drama, but on the patient accumulation of days, each one much like the last, each one enough. The platypus has no stomach. This is worth pausing on, because the stomach is one of the organs we tend to assume all vertebrates share. It is such a fundamental part of the digestive system, the acid-filled chamber that breaks down food before it passes into the intestine, that its absence in an animal seems almost impossible to imagine. But the platypus does not have one. In most vertebrates, the stomach sits between the esophagus and the small intestine, secreting acids and enzymes that begin the chemical breakdown of food. In the platypus, this chamber does not exist. The esophagus connects directly to the small intestine. There is no acid bath waiting for the food. There is no gastric processing chamber. Food goes in at one end and moves straight on to the intestine for absorption. This feature is shared with the echidna, the platypus's closest relative, and with some species of fish, all of which also lack a true stomach. It is considered a primitive feature, meaning it may reflect an ancestral condition that was present before the stomach evolved in most vertebrate lineages. The platypus compensates partly by grinding its food very thoroughly with the hard keratinized pads in its bill before swallowing, and partly by having intestinal chemistry adapted to process the kinds of food it typically eats. Invertebrates like insect larvae and small crustaceans do not require as much acid pre-processing as the plant material or red meat that challenges more complex digestive systems. When you think about it, the platypus is missing one of the key innovations of vertebrate evolution, the stomach, and yet it is doing just fine. 20 million years of just fine, in fact. Indigenous Australians have known the platypus for at least 65,000 years. The presence of human beings in Australia stretches back at least 65,000 years, possibly longer, making Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples among the oldest continuous cultures on the planet. Throughout all of that time, the platypus was there in the rivers. Different language groups across Australia had their own names for the platypus, their own stories about it, their own relationships to it. In some communities, the platypus held special cultural significance. In the Dreamtime stories of various groups, the platypus sometimes figures as a creature created from parts of many animals, a being that does not fit neatly into the categories the world provides. Some accounts describe the platypus as a totemic animal for certain clans, meaning it carried sacred significance and was treated with particular care and respect. In some areas, platypus was a food source, hunted with care alongside other river animals. In others, it was protected by custom. The deep ecological knowledge accumulated by Aboriginal peoples over tens of thousands of years included detailed awareness of the platypus's habits, its preferred rivers, its seasonal behaviors. This kind of knowledge, earned through sustained observation across generations, is a kind of science in its own right. There is a certain perspective that comes from knowing an animal not for a few decades of formal study, but for thousands upon thousands of years of living beside it, in the same landscape, through every season the land offers. When we speak of the platypus as mysterious or surprising or poorly understood, it is worth remembering that this is true only from a certain point of view. For the oldest custodians of the rivers where it lives, the platypus was never a mystery. It was a neighbor. The platypus is currently classified as a near-threatened species. For most of its long history, the platypus was simply part of the landscape of eastern Australia. It was common. It was present wherever there were clean rivers and stable banks. It asked very little of the world, and the world, for most of those millions of years, provided. The situation today is more complicated. In the 150 or so years since European settlement began to transform the Australian landscape in earnest, platypus populations have declined significantly. Their range, once extending through much of eastern Australia from tropical Queensland to cold mountain streams in Victoria and Tasmania, has contracted. In some river systems where they were once common, they have vanished. The threats are multiple and interconnected. Land clearing along riverbanks removes the vegetation that stabilizes the banks where platypuses dig their burrows. Without stable banks, burrows collapse. Without burrows, platypuses cannot breed. Dams and weirs fragment river systems, cutting populations off from one another. A platypus cannot simply walk over a dam wall to reach the river on the other side. Populations become isolated, their genetic diversity narrows, and their resilience to disease or drought decreases. Pollution degrades water quality. The invertebrates that platypuses depend on for food are sensitive to changes in water chemistry and temperature. Where water quality falls, invertebrate populations fall with it, and platypus populations follow. Climate change brings increased drought, frequency, and intensity in many parts of Australia, reducing the water levels in the rivers and streams that platypuses depend on. A river running dry is a catastrophe for an animal that spends its life in water and its days in a burrow in the bank. The bushfires of 2019 and 20,000 burned through vast areas of platypus habitat across the southeast of Australia, degrading water quality through ash and debris, killing the insects and other invertebrates in affected waterways, and directly affecting platypus populations in many river systems. Conservation efforts are underway. Scientists are developing population monitoring techniques, including the use of environmental DNA, a method where water samples are analyzed for traces of platypus genetic material to detect their presence without needing to observe the animals directly. Revegetation projects along riverbanks are restoring habitat. Some weirs have been fitted with experimental platypus crossing structures. The platypus has survived far larger catastrophes in its long history. Ice ages, mass extinctions, the drifting of continents. Whether it can navigate the particular combination of challenges that the current era presents depends, at least partly, on choices that human beings make about their rivers, their land, and what they decide to protect. The platypus can detect the Earth's magnetic field. Or at least, there is strong evidence that it might. Among the thousands of receptors in the platypus's bill are units that some researchers believe may be sensitive to magnetic fields. This would place the platypus alongside birds, certain fish, sea turtles, and other animals that appear to use the Earth's magnetic field for navigation. The research on this is not yet definitive. Magnetoreception, the ability to sense magnetic fields, is one of the more difficult sensory abilities to study and confirm because it leaves no obvious trace in behavior the way sight or hearing does. You cannot simply watch an animal and tell whether it is navigating by magnetic sense. You need carefully controlled experiments. And doing carefully controlled experiments with an animal as shy and nocturnal as the platypus is not easy. But the structural evidence is suggestive. The type of receptor cells found in the bill and their similarity to receptors known to mediate magnetic sensing in other animals has led a number of researchers to argue that the platypus may indeed possess a sixth sense beyond electroreception. If this is confirmed, it would mean that a platypus hunting in a dark river is simultaneously detecting electrical fields from its prey, mechanical pressure waves in the water, and possibly the orientation of the Earth's magnetic field, all at the same time, all through a single extraordinary organ at the front of its face. The scientific name of the platypus has a complicated and slightly embarrassing history. The platypus was given its formal scientific name in 1799, the same year that George Shaw was busy checking the specimen for stitches. The name assigned at the time was Platypus anatinus. Platypus comes from the Greek words for flat-footed, which seemed apt given the wide, webbed feet. Anatinus means duck-like. So the name essentially meant flat-footed, duck-like creature, which under the circumstances was a reasonable attempt. The problem was that the word platypus had already been used. A genus of beetle had previously been given that name, and under the rules of biological nomenclature, the same name cannot be applied to two different genera. So a new genus name had to be found for the platypus, and the name eventually settled upon was Ornithorhynchus, from the Greek for bird-snouted. So the full scientific name is now Ornithorhynchus anatinus, bird-snouted duck-like, which is, in its own way, quite descriptive. The common name platypus, however, stuck. Even though the genus name could not formally be platypus, everyone continued to call the animal by that word. And so today we have the slightly unusual situation of an animal whose common name references an invalid scientific name that was replaced by a different scientific name, while the common name stayed put. Some people proposed the name water mole for a time, and in the early days of European settlement in Australia, it was also called the duckbill, or the duck mole, or the water mole. None of these names captured the animal's full strangeness. None of them quite fit. Platypus, with its Greek roots and its slightly awkward history, is what remained. As with so many things about this animal, the name tells only a fraction of the story. Platypuses are surprisingly strong swimmers relative to their size. A platypus weighs somewhere between 1 and 2.5 kilograms, depending on sex and season. Males are generally larger than females. They are not heavy animals. They are not large animals by any measure. And yet in the water, they move with a power and efficiency that belies their modest dimensions. They are not fast swimmers in an open water sense. They cannot outrace a fish, but they are extraordinarily good at navigating the particular conditions of their natural environment mountain streams with strong currents, rocky riverbeds with complex microhabitats, silty pools where the bottom is muddy and unpredictable. In these conditions, the platypus is highly efficient. Its front feet, with their extendable webbing, function like paddles, and the platypus pulls itself through the water in a smooth rowing motion, alternating left and right strokes. It can move upstream against moderate current without apparent difficulty. It can hover in position near the bottom, pressing its bill into the substrate to search for prey. It can turn quickly in a confined space. On land, the front webbing folds back to expose the claws, which are used for digging. The platypus can dig with impressive speed and purpose, excavating a burrow through compacted riverbank soil in a way that seems almost disproportionate to its size. Researchers fitting tracking devices to platypuses have found that individuals routinely travel several kilometers per night during foraging, covering their entire home range methodically before returning to the burrow before dawn. There is nothing inefficient about the platypus. It may look like an animal assembled from spare parts, but every part works exactly as it should, in the habitat it was shaped for, in the life it has always led. Platypuses are one of the few animals that do not have a visual cortex in the same brain region as most other mammals. The brain of the platypus has attracted scientific attention for many of the same reasons that the rest of the animal has. It is different. Not dramatically different, not alien, but shaped by the platypus's particular sensory world in ways that reflect its unique evolutionary history. In most mammals, visual processing is handled by a substantial portion of the brain's cortex. Humans devote a large fraction of their cortical tissue to processing visual information. Even in animals with less acute vision, the visual cortex is usually a significant presence. In the platypus, the visual cortex is reduced. The platypus hunts in total darkness with its eyes closed. It does not need an elaborate visual system for its primary means of finding food. Instead, the area of the cortex devoted to processing sensory information from the bill is proportionally very large. The bill and its tens of thousands of electrical and mechanical receptors is the platypus's primary window onto the world, and the brain has been shaped accordingly. This kind of correspondence between sensory emphasis and brain organization is found throughout the animal kingdom. Animals that rely heavily on smell have large olfactory bulbs. Animals that rely on hearing in three-dimensional space have enlarged auditory processing areas. The bat navigates by sound, and its auditory cortex is enormous relative to its brain size. The mole navigates by touch, and its somatosensory cortex reflects that emphasis. In the platypus, the emphasis is on the bill. The brain of this quiet, river-dwelling animal has been sculpted by millions of years of life in dark water, hunting by electrical sense, reaching a form that is as efficient and precisely matched to its purpose as any engineering the natural world has produced. The platypus does not have a brood pouch like a marsupial. This is a point of confusion for many people encountering the platypus for the first time. Australia is famous for its marsupials. Kangaroos, wallabies, koalas, wombats, Tasmanian devils, possums. All of these give birth to live young that are extremely underdeveloped, and the young then crawl into a pouch on the mother's body, where they continue to develop, attached to a nipple, for weeks or months. The platypus is not a marsupial. It is a monotreme. These are two distinct mammalian lineages, both found in Australia but having diverged from one another, far back in the mammalian family tree. The platypus does not have a brood pouch. It does not give birth to live young at all. It lays eggs, and the young, when they hatch, develop inside the sealed burrow rather than inside an external pouch. What the platypus and the marsupials share is a location. Australia separated from the rest of the ancient southern supercontinent Gondwana tens of millions of years ago, taking with it the ancestors of the monotremes and marsupials. Cut off from competition with the placental mammals that came to dominate other continents, both the monotremes and the marsupials survived and diversified in their own ways. The monotremes, of which only two families survive today, the platypus family and the akidna family, are the most ancient branch of the mammal tree. They share features with reptiles that other mammals lost long ago. They are, in many ways, a living bridge, connecting the mammal world of today to the ancient reptilian world from which it came. To see a platypus is, in a sense, to see something of what the earliest mammals were like before the full range of mammalian features had been established. A glimpse backward in time, quiet and brown and swimming in a dark river, on a dark Australian night. Scientists have recently found that platypus populations may have declined by as much as 30% over the past 30 years. This is a number that deserves to settle quietly in the mind for a moment. 30%. In the span of a single human generation, an animal that has been present in Australian rivers for tens of millions of years has lost nearly a third of its population. A study published in 2020 compiled data from surveys conducted across the platypus's range and modeled the likely trends in population over the coming decades. The findings were sobering. Not only had numbers fallen significantly already, but the combination of ongoing habitat loss, water extraction, climate change, and fragmentation of river systems meant that, without intervention, the trend was likely to continue. Some regions showed steeper declines than others. The Murray-Darling Basin, the vast river system that drains much of inland eastern Australia, was identified as a particularly concerning area. The rivers there have been heavily modified for agriculture, and platypus populations have dropped significantly from historical levels. Tasmania, with its relatively intact river systems and lower levels of development, remains a stronghold. Parts of Victoria and Queensland also retain healthy populations in undisturbed catchments. The research community's recommendation was for the platypus to be uplisted from least concern to near threatened on the IUCN Red List, which happened in 2016. Some researchers argue that the near threatened designation may itself be too conservative, and that vulnerable may be a more accurate reflection of the animal's situation. An animal 180 million years old, quietly facing a century of disruption greater than anything it has met before. There is something in this worth sitting with, even as you drift towards sleep. The platypus is the subject of an ongoing and unresolved debate about whether it dreams. It is not as absurd a question as it might first appear. We know that mammals dream, or at least that mammals experience REM sleep, the rapid eye movement phase of sleep during which vivid dreaming in humans occurs. The brain activity during REM sleep has a distinctive pattern, different from both waking activity and the deeper stages of non-REM sleep, and it has been documented in many mammal species. The question for the platypus is more complex. Early studies of platypus sleep found that the animal displays what appears to be REM sleep, with the characteristic brainwave patterns, and, remarkably, the twitching of eyes, limbs, and the bill. A sleeping platypus sometimes moves its bill in rapid, searching sweeps, similar to the movements it makes when hunting underwater. Is it replaying the experience of hunting? Is the sleeping brain rehearsing the sensory landscape of the dark river? The deeper puzzle is that in many species, REM sleep appears to be associated with memory consolidation, with the processing and integration of experience. If the platypus is experiencing something like REM sleep, and if REM sleep serves a similar function in the platypus as in other mammals, then there is at least a question worth asking about what the sleeping brain of the platypus is doing. No one can say with certainty what the inner life of a platypus is like. We cannot ask it. We cannot share its experience. But there is something quietly moving about a small, fur-covered, bill-twitching creature. Curled up in the dark of a riverbank burrow, its legs moving in slow, searching strokes, its bill sweeping left and right and left again, as if, even in sleep, it is following the electrical whisper of something small and alive in dark water. The platypus is deeply embedded in Australian cultural identity. It appears on the back of the Australian 20-cent coin. It has been the mascot of international sporting events hosted in Australia. It features in children's books, in educational materials, in wildlife documentaries, and in the broader cultural mythology of a country that takes a certain pride in its unusual fauna. But beyond the symbolic and the official, the platypus occupies a particular place in the Australian imagination. It is the animal that is somehow both absurd and perfect. The animal that made scientists reach for scissors to check for stitches. The animal that is venomous and milk-giving and egg-laying all at once. The animal that hunts by electricity in dark rivers, glows under ultraviolet light, stores fat in its tail, and has 10 sex chromosomes. It is the animal that refuses to be categorized. And in a country that has its own complicated relationship with categorization, with the ways that colonial thinking tried to impose its own frameworks onto a landscape and a living world that did not fit them, the platypus carries a kind of meaning. It simply is what it is. It does not need permission to be extraordinary. It does not need validation from European scientists checking for stitches. It was always there, in the rivers, doing what it has always done, long before anyone arrived to be puzzled by it. Platypuses spend roughly 12 to 14 hours each day asleep inside their burrows. This is worth dwelling on for a moment. Here, in the quiet, as you settle towards sleep yourself, more than half of each day, the platypus is resting. Tucked into a tunnel in the riverbank, its dense fur warm against the cool earth, its bill resting gently against the leaf-lined floor of the chamber, completely still. It is not a restless animal. It does not pace. It does not seem to experience the anxious alertness that characterizes many prey animals. It is in its burrow and it is safe, and so it sleeps. The burrow itself is remarkable in its simplicity. Dug by the platypus's own powerful front claws, lined with soft material carried in by the animal, just the right diameter for the platypus's body, just long enough to provide safety and temperature stability. The temperature inside a burrow remains relatively constant regardless of the weather outside. On hot Australian summer days, the burrow is cool. On cold winter nights, when frost forms on the surface, the burrow holds warmth. It is a precisely calibrated refuge, dug to the animal's own specifications, holding the animal in exactly the conditions it needs. There is something deeply soothing about this image. A small, warm animal, tucked into a dark tunnel in the earth, safe and still, with the river running quietly just outside, and the forest standing silently above, and the hours of dark and rest ahead. Sleep, for the platypus, is not a concession. It is simply part of what it means to be alive, and to do it right. The platypus was once hunted extensively for its fur. In the decades following European settlement of Australia, the platypus came under significant pressure from hunting. Its fur was dense, soft, and waterproof, and it was considered commercially valuable. Platypus pelts were used to make rugs, coats, and other items, and large numbers of animals were killed during the late 19th and early 20th centuries for the trade. By the early 1900s, concern about the declining platypus population had already begun to surface. Victoria introduced protections for the platypus as early as 1884, making it one of the earlier examples of wildlife conservation legislation in Australia. Other states followed over the following decades. The hunting trade eventually came to an end, and the platypus was legally protected across its entire range. The recovery from the hunting era was substantial. Platypus populations rebounded over the middle decades of the 20th century, returning to many rivers from which they had been absent. This is one of the reasons the current decline, caused by habitat loss and climate change rather than direct hunting, is in some ways more difficult to address. The hunting could be stopped with a law. The slow degradation of river systems is a more complex and diffuse problem, woven into the fabric of how land is used, how water is managed, and how the climate is changing. But the recovery from hunting shows what is possible. When the pressure was removed and the rivers remained, the platypus came back. It is a patient animal, It knows its rivers. It knows what to do when the conditions are right. The platypus breathes through its nose while its mouth is sealed shut during dives. During a dive, the platypus seals all three of its external openings simultaneously. Its nostrils close. Its eyes close. Its ears close. It becomes, in a sense, a sealed capsule moving through the water, its only connection to the environment outside its own body, mediated entirely through the receptors in the surface of its bill. When it surfaces, all three openings reopen and it takes a breath. The breathing cycle of a foraging platypus has a distinctive rhythm. A dive of 30 to 90 seconds, a surface pause of 10 to 15 seconds to breathe, and then another dive. Over and over through the night. The nostrils of the platypus sit at the very end of the bill, well forward on the face, positioned so that the platypus can breathe while floating almost completely submerged, with barely the tip of the bill above the waterline. The ears are simple openings just behind and slightly below the eyes, without the external ear structures that most mammals have. When they seal shut during a dive, they close completely and smoothly, leaving no gap for water to enter. There is something meditative about this cycle. This in and out, this open and close, this repeated descent into dark water and return to air, breathing and diving and breathing, through the long hours of the Australian night. Something almost like the rhythm of sleep itself. Platypus populations in different rivers have slightly different behaviors. Science has traditionally treated the platypus as a single species across its range, which is broadly accurate at the genetic level. Ornithorhynchus anatinus is one species, found across eastern Australia and Tasmania, without any subspecies currently recognized by most authorities. But when researchers spend time closely observing platypuses in different parts of that range, differences begin to emerge. Platypuses in Tasmania, where rivers tend to be colder and often faster, seem to dive to greater depths on average than those in warmer lowland rivers on the mainland. Platypuses in highland streams tend to be more active during the day in cooler months than their counterparts in warmer lowland rivers, where the nocturnal pattern is more strictly observed. Burrow construction varies with the type of riverbank available. Platypuses in clay-heavy banks dig longer, more elaborate burrows than those in sandy banks, where collapse is a greater risk. In some areas, platypuses have been observed using natural cavities, such as hollows beneath the roots of large trees, rather than digging at all. These behavioral differences are not genetic. They are learned and adaptive responses to the particular conditions of each animal's home river. This suggests that individual platypuses, over the course of their long lives, accumulate a detailed and specific knowledge of their environment. They learn which sections of riverbed are most productive. They learn the seasonal patterns of their local insect populations. They learn the behavior of the water across seasons, which pools deepen in winter, which runs dry in summer. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It is not stored in any database. It lives in the body and the behavior of a single animal, accumulated over 20 years of life in one river, and it is lost when that animal dies. There is something precious about knowledge like that, something irreplaceable. The platypus uses its tail to carry nesting material into its burrow. This is one of those small behavioral details that tends to produce a smile in people hearing it for the first time, because the image it creates is so specific and so quietly charming. When a female platypus is preparing her nesting burrow, she collects leaves, grass, and other soft plant material from the riverbank and the surrounding vegetation. She needs this material to line the inner chamber of the burrow, to provide insulation for the eggs and, later, for the young. To carry this material into the burrow, she curls her tail against her body and holds the material against it, tucking leaves and grass under her tail like a living basket. She shuffles backward into the burrow carrying her load, depositing it in the nesting chamber, and then emerges again to collect more. There is no alternative strategy she could use that would be more effective. She cannot carry material in her mouth the way a bird does, because her mouth is at the end of a bill shaped for sensing and scooping, not for gripping. She cannot use her front feet while walking because she needs them. And so the tail, that broad, flat, useful tail, becomes a carrier. Each trip adds a little more material to the nest. Each piece of leaf and grass pressed into place makes the chamber slightly warmer, slightly softer, slightly more protected against the cold of the earth. And then, when the nest is ready, she will seal herself inside it and lay her eggs in the warm dark and wait. The platypus does not drink water in the conventional way. This is a minor detail, but a telling one. Most mammals drink by opening their mouth and swallowing water. The platypus, which lives in water and whose bill is shaped for sensing rather than for scooping liquids efficiently, gets most of the water it needs from the prey it eats. The invertebrates it consumes, the insect larvae and worms and small crustaceans, contain significant amounts of water, and this appears to be sufficient for the platypus's hydration needs under normal conditions. During dives, the platypus is surrounded by water but does not drink it. The eyes, ears, and nostrils are sealed. The bill is pressed against the substrate. No water enters except what arrives incidentally with the prey. This makes the platypus somewhat unusual among mammals that live in or near fresh water. Many aquatic and semi-aquatic mammals drink directly from the water they inhabit. The platypus lives alongside its water source, but draws its hydration almost entirely from food, in a pattern more reminiscent of desert-adapted animals than of the river-dwelling creature it appears to be. Biology is full of these small surprises. The animal that seems most connected to water doesn't drink it in the way you'd expect. The animal that looks most assembled from parts turns out to be the most precisely adapted to its specific niche. Every assumption, when applied to the platypus, deserves to be checked. Young platypuses are sometimes called puggles. This is not an official scientific term. The correct biological term for a newly hatched monotreme is a hatchling, and more colloquially, simply a young platypus. But somewhere along the way, the word puggle began to be used informally, particularly in zoo and conservation contexts, and it has stuck in popular usage. It is, admittedly, an extremely apt word. A newly hatched platypus is small enough to rest on a fingertip. It is pink and largely hairless at first, with tiny, undeveloped front limbs that will become the powerful swimming paddles of the adult. Its bill is soft and not yet fully formed. Its eyes are sealed shut beneath the skin and will not open for about 11 weeks. It is, in short, utterly helpless. And yet from this tiny, vulnerable beginning, a creature capable of surviving for 20 years in a cold mountain stream will eventually grow. The young platypus spends its first 3 to 4 months entirely within the sealed burrow. It nurses from the milk that seeps through the mother's skin. It grows slowly and steadily, developing fur, opening its eyes, strengthening its limbs. The mother remains close, leaving briefly to forage, but returning to nurse and warm her young. When the young platypus finally emerges from the burrow, it is already largely self-sufficient. It can swim. It can dive. The bill's sensors, even without much prior experience, begin immediately to detect the electrical signatures of prey. It leaves the natal burrow and moves downstream to establish its own stretch of river. Its mother returns to her own life. They will not see each other again in any meaningful social sense. A young platypus going out into the world for the first time, carrying nothing but instinct and a remarkably sophisticated bill, and the long dark river ahead. Scientists have used eDNA sampling to track platypus populations without ever seeing the animals. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, is one of the more remarkable tools to emerge in ecological research over recent decades. The principle is simple. Every living organism sheds genetic material into its environment through shed cells, mucus, feces, urine, and other biological traces. In aquatic environments, this genetic material mixes into the water and disperses downstream. By taking water samples from a river and analyzing them for platypus DNA using highly sensitive laboratory techniques, researchers can determine whether platypuses are present in that section of river, without needing to observe a single animal. This matters enormously for platypus research, because platypuses are extremely difficult to observe directly. They are nocturnal. They are shy. They spend most of their time underwater or inside their burrows. Traditional survey methods, including spotlight surveys along riverbanks at night, are time-consuming, weather-dependent, and often produce inconclusive results. eDNA surveys can cover a much larger area more quickly. A team of researchers sampling water from multiple points along a river system in a single day can build a picture of platypus distribution across hundreds of kilometers of waterway. The technique has already produced surprising findings. In some river systems where platypuses had not been recorded for many years, eDNA surveys have detected their presence, suggesting that animals were present but simply too elusive to have been spotted during traditional surveys. In others, eDNA has confirmed local extinctions that were suspected but not formally documented. There is something poetically fitting about this. An animal that has spent its entire evolutionary history being quiet, staying out of sight, living its life in the dark and the deep, finally being found, not by eyes, but by the invisible traces it leaves behind in the water. The platypus's bill contains more nerve endings per square centimeter than almost any other structure in the animal kingdom. This is a claim that deserves to be unpacked carefully, because it is saying something quite specific and quite astonishing. The human fingertip, which is among the most sensitive touch organs in the natural world, contains roughly 2,500 nerve endings per square centimeter. This density is what allows us to read Braille, to detect the difference between surfaces that feel almost identical, to feel the grain in a piece of wood, to distinguish textures that differ by only a few micrometers. The bill of the platypus contains an estimated 40,000 sensory receptors across its surface. The bill is not enormous. It is roughly 5 to 6 centimeters long and 3 to 4 centimeters wide. That means the density of sensory information it can gather is extraordinary even by the standards of animal biology. And these receptors are not just touch sensors. Mixed among the mechanoreceptors that detect touch and pressure are the electroreceptors that detect electrical fields, arranged in rows across the bill in a pattern that allows the animal to triangulate the source of a signal. When a platypus presses its bill against the riverbed and sweeps it slowly across the substrate, it is processing a stream of information from these 40,000 receptors simultaneously, building a sensory map of its immediate environment that is as detailed and rich in information as any visual scene a human might perceive. Different? Certainly. Perhaps stranger from our perspective, but no less complete. The platypus does not see the river bottom. It feels it, electrically and mechanically, through a bill that is more sensitive than our most sensitive fingertips. In absolute darkness, underwater. The platypus's waterproof fur has inspired materials science research. The ability to be simultaneously completely wet on the outside and completely dry and warm on the inside is something that engineers working on waterproof materials have been trying to achieve with artificial materials for decades. The platypus does it naturally, through the architecture of its fur. The key is the layered structure. The outermost layer of long guard hairs creates a surface that sheds water efficiently, the way a tent's outer membrane sheds rain. The middle layer provides structural support and traps air. The innermost layer of very fine underfur is what maintains the warm air pocket close to the skin, the layer that never gets wet. When the platypus dives, water penetrates through the guard hair layer, but is stopped by the structure of the coat before it reaches the underfur. The air trapped within the fur is compressed slightly during a deep dive, but it does not escape. When the platypus surfaces, the compression releases, and the insulating layer is restored. Researchers studying natural waterproofing have examined the platypus fur in detail under electron microscopes, mapping the exact arrangement of individual hairs and the way surface tension interacts with the coat structure. Some of this research has informed the development of new synthetic textiles and membranes that attempt to replicate the passive waterproofing the platypus achieves through biological design. Nature has a long head start on materials science. The platypus's fur has been refined over millions of years of life in cold rivers. Each small adaptation, selected for by the pressure of living in water and needing to stay warm. The result is a structure more elegant than anything we have yet built in a laboratory. Platypuses have been spotted in rivers flowing through cities. This is perhaps one of the more surprising things about the platypus's relationship with human settlement. We tend to think of wild animals, particularly ancient and unusual wild animals, as being restricted to pristine wilderness. The platypus, with its exacting requirements for clean water and stable banks, seems like an animal that would be entirely intolerant of human proximity. And yet there are documented platypus sightings in waterways running through or near urban areas. The Yarra River, which flows through Melbourne, one of Australia's largest cities, has had platypuses recorded in its upper reaches for years. Some urban waterways that have been the subject of restoration efforts, with improved water quality and revegetation of banks, have seen platypuses return to sections from which they had been absent. The platypus does not choose urban rivers because it prefers them. It chooses them, when it does, because rivers run where they run, and if the water quality is adequate and the banks are stable enough to burrow in, the platypus will use what it finds. The sight of a platypus surfacing in a river near a city, visible for a moment from a footbridge, has become one of those small and remarkable encounters that Australians living near suitable waterways occasionally experience. A glimpse of something ancient and unexpected, going about its business in the slow water beneath an ordinary urban bridge. There is something hopeful in that. The platypus carries its young's development to an unusually advanced stage inside the egg. Platypus eggs are incubated inside the mother's body before being laid, unlike the eggs of birds, which develop primarily outside the body after laying. The platypus egg spends roughly 27 to 28 days developing inside the female before it is laid. During this internal development, the embryo grows substantially. By the time the egg is laid, it contains a fairly well-developed embryo, already at a stage that would take many days to reach if the egg had been laid immediately after fertilization. The shell of the platypus egg is deposited around the developing embryo during the final stages of internal development, forming the leathery outer layer that the platypus incubates for 10 days before hatching occurs. This combination of internal and external development is considered a primitive feature, an intermediate strategy between the fully internal development of placental mammals and the fully external development of reptiles. It is, in a sense, a snapshot of a transition that happened in mammalian evolution, long before any specific mammal species existed that we would recognize today. The platypus did not choose to be a window into evolutionary history. It simply continued doing what had always worked. But in doing so, it preserved a reproductive strategy that tells us something irreplaceable about how mammals came to be what they are. The platypus has the slowest known rate of evolution among living mammals. This is a finding from genome science that resonates beautifully with everything else we know about the platypus. When scientists compare the rate at which different mammal genomes accumulate genetic changes over time, they find a consistent pattern. Animals that reproduce quickly and have short generations, like mice, tend to accumulate genetic changes rapidly. Animals with longer generations and slower reproduction tend to accumulate changes more slowly. The platypus is at the slow end of this spectrum. Its genome has changed remarkably little over an extraordinarily long time. Comparisons of platypus gene sequences with those of other mammals suggest that the platypus genome has been evolving at a rate significantly slower than most other mammal lineages. This is consistent with the platypus's longevity, its low reproductive rate, and the stability of its lifestyle and environment over millions of years. When a species is doing well in a stable environment, there is less selective pressure for rapid change. The successful variants survive. The unsuccessful ones don't. Over time, the genome of a successful, stable species changes slowly. The platypus, in other words, evolved slowly because it got things right early and then held on. 180 million years of getting things right. Slowly, steadily, quietly, without the drama of rapid transformation. There is a lesson somewhere in that, if we are patient enough to see it. The rivers where platypuses live are some of the most biodiverse freshwater ecosystems in Australia. When a platypus thrives in a river, it is almost always a sign that the river itself is healthy. The platypus is what ecologists sometimes call an umbrella species, an animal whose presence and abundance reflects the overall condition of the ecosystem it inhabits. To support a platypus population, a river must have clean water with sufficient oxygen. It must have stable banks with enough structure for burrowing. It must have an abundant and diverse invertebrate community, which in turn requires good water quality, appropriate water temperatures, and sufficient aquatic vegetation and organic material to support the food web from the base up. Where the platypus is present, all of these things tend to be present too. And where those things are present, the entire community of freshwater life tends to be richer. Freshwater fish, frogs, aquatic insects in their hundreds of species, turtles, water birds, all of these tend to be more diverse and abundant in rivers that support platypuses. This is why conservation biologists argue that protecting the platypus means protecting entire river ecosystems. It is not just about one charismatic and unusual mammal. It is about the web of life that the platypus is part of, and that it helps to indicate. A river healthy enough for a platypus is a river that is doing its job. Filtering water, providing habitat, supporting biodiversity, connecting the land and the water in the complex, self-sustaining way that river ecosystems have been doing for hundreds of millions of years. Platypus populations in Tasmania are the most robust remaining in the world. Tasmania, the island state south of mainland Australia, separated from the mainland by Bass Strait, holds what are widely considered the healthiest and most intact platypus populations anywhere in the animal's range. The reasons for this are tied to Tasmania's geography and settlement history. The island has a higher proportion of its original vegetation intact than most of mainland Australia. Its rivers, fed by rainfall from mountain catchments largely free of intensive agriculture, tend to be cleaner and more stable than many mainland waterways. The human population is smaller and more concentrated, leaving large areas of river catchment in relatively natural condition. Tasmanian platypuses are also notable for tolerating the coldest conditions of any in the species range. Mountain rivers in Tasmania can approach freezing temperatures in winter, and platypuses in these rivers dive into near icy water night after night throughout the cold season. Research conducted in Tasmania has contributed significantly to our understanding of platypus biology, precisely because the populations are large enough and accessible enough to make sustained fieldwork possible. Some of the longest-running individual platypus studies have been conducted in Tasmanian rivers, tracking the same individuals over years and even decades. In a sense, Tasmania is a repository, a place where the platypus exists in something closer to the conditions it has known for millions of years, where the rivers run clean and the banks are stable, and the nights are cold and dark and full of invertebrates waiting to be found. A refuge at the edge of the world. The platypus is one of the few mammals known to be fluorescent, and scientists are still working out why. We touched on this earlier. The surprising discovery that platypus fur glows blue-green under ultraviolet light. But it is worth sitting with this, finding a little longer, because its implications extend beyond the platypus itself. Biofluorescence was long thought to be primarily a marine phenomenon. Corals, certain fish, jellyfish, and a range of other marine organisms have been documented fluorescing under ultraviolet light, and it was assumed that the phenomenon had something to do with the particular light environment of shallow oceans, where ultraviolet light penetrates well. The discovery of biofluorescence in terrestrial and semi-aquatic mammals, like the platypus, the flying squirrel, and the spring hare, has forced a reconsideration of this assumption. If biofluorescence has evolved independently in multiple mammal lineages, it must have some function or set of functions that provides an advantage in those environments. Some researchers have proposed that fluorescence might serve as a form of camouflage. If a predator can see ultraviolet light, a fluorescent animal might blend better into a naturally fluorescent background, such as certain plants or soil surfaces that also fluoresce. Others have proposed that it might serve in intraspecific signaling, helping platypuses detect one another during the brief encounters of mating season, under conditions of low visible light. Others still have suggested it might simply be a byproduct of something else, a structural feature of the fur that generates fluorescence without any particular adaptive function. The honest answer is that we do not know yet. The platypus continues to generate questions faster than science can answer them. And perhaps that, too, is part of what makes it so extraordinary. There is still so much we do not know about the platypus. Despite everything, despite the genome sequencing and the tracking devices and the electroreception studies and the milk research and the venom analysis, there is still so much that remains unknown. We do not fully understand how platypuses find mates. We do not fully understand their social structure, or whether they have one. We do not fully understand how they communicate, or whether they have forms of communication we have simply not yet detected. We do not know whether they navigate by magnetism. We do not know the full range of compounds in their milk and venom and what those compounds are doing. We do not know exactly how the electroreceptive system processes its signals into the kind of precise three-dimensional mapping that allows the animal to find a single larva tucked under a stone in complete darkness. We do not know what the experience of being a platypus is like. We do not know what the dark river feels like when you are moving through it, sensing the electrical signatures of living things, guided by a bill of extraordinary sensitivity, holding your breath, paddling through water that is cold and black and full of information. We do not know what the burrow feels like from the inside, the pressed earth walls, the smell of damp soil, the warmth of your own body, and the sound of the river running through the dark on the other side of the entrance. We do not know what it is like to sleep curled around two small leathery eggs, breathing slowly, keeping them warm with your own warmth, waiting in the dark for them to hatch. These are things that science may never fully reach. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps an animal this ancient, this particular, this quietly perfect in its own strange way, is allowed to keep some of its mystery. The first time a person sees a wild platypus, something changes in them that doesn't change back. This is not something you find in scientific papers. It is something that researchers who study platypuses talk about among themselves. There is a quality to the experience of seeing this animal in the wild that seems to leave a mark on people. It is partly the surprise of it. You are standing at the edge of a dark river, perhaps after a long, patient wait, and then, without warning, the surface of the water parts, and something rises from below and breathes, and dives again before you can quite process what you have seen. It is partly the ancient quality of it, the knowledge, even if only half-consciously held, that what you are looking at has been doing exactly this, in rivers like this one, for longer than you can truly hold in your mind. It is partly the silence. An animal that makes no sound, that asks for nothing, that does not notice you, or, if it does, simply dives and continues elsewhere. The encounter is entirely one-sided. The river continues. The platypus continues. And you stand at the water's edge, feeling, perhaps, briefly small in a way that feels more like a gift than an insult. Researchers who have spent decades working with platypuses describe a sustained affection for the animal that goes beyond the professional. There is something about its stubborn existence, its refusal to be categorized, its deep evolutionary age, its quiet perfection in its own particular niche, that seems to inspire something protective and tender in the people who know it best. It is an animal worth caring about, and knowing it a little better, perhaps, makes caring a little easier. The rivers of Australia are some of the oldest river systems on Earth. Australia is the oldest, flattest, and driest inhabited continent. Its ancient geology, eroded over hundreds of millions of years with no major mountain-building events in recent geological time, has produced a landscape that is in many ways unlike any other on the planet. The rivers that flow through this landscape are not young, fast-cutting rivers carving new channels through fresh rock. Many of them follow paths that have been stable for tens of millions of years. Their valleys were already ancient when the platypus's ancestors first began slipping into them. The Yarra River catchment in Victoria, one of the platypus's key habitats near Melbourne, follows a drainage pattern that has been in place for somewhere around 30 to 40 million years. The Murray-Darling Basin, the vast inland drainage system that covers much of southeastern Australia, has an even older history. Its broad river plains laid down over geological periods that stretch back well before the appearance of modern mammals. When a platypus navigates a particular bend in a river it has known all its life, it is moving through a landscape shaped by geological processes that were already old when its lineage was young. This is the context in which the platypus has always existed. Not a new world of rapid change and geological freshness, but an ancient, settled, deeply worn landscape that has been finding its own equilibrium for longer than most of the world's mountain ranges have existed. The platypus fits this landscape. It belongs to it in a way that feels complete, the way a hand fits a glove made for it, or the way a word fits a thought that has been waiting to be spoken. Every single fact about the platypus seemed impossible until it was proved. Eggs? Impossible. Proved. Venom? Impossible. Proved. Electricity sensing? Impossible. Proved. Milk through skin? Impossible. Proved. 10 sex chromosomes? Impossible. Proved. Glowing under ultraviolet light? Impossible. Proved. There is a rhythm to the history of platypus science that is worth noticing. Every new discovery about this animal has followed the same arc. Someone observes something or proposes something that seems too strange to be true. The scientific establishment resists. The evidence accumulates. The impossible becomes the established fact. And then, a few years later, the next impossible thing arrives. This is not just interesting as a history of biology. It is interesting as a story about how human minds encounter things that do not fit their categories. Our categories are useful. They help us organize the world. They allow us to predict, to plan, to communicate. But they are not the world. The world is under no obligation to fit inside the frameworks we build to describe it. The platypus, more than almost any other organism, demonstrates this clearly and repeatedly. It did not evolve to challenge our categories. It evolved to survive in Australian rivers. But in doing so, it became one of the most powerful reminders in all of natural history that reality is always larger, stranger, and more astonishing than our current best understanding of it. To know the platypus well is to become, in some small way, more humble. And humility, in the face of the extraordinary, is a very good place to rest. The sound of the river at night is one of the most ancient sounds on Earth. Not literally, of course. Sound requires a medium to travel through, and the particular vibration of water over stone in this particular river began at the moment this river began. But the kind of sound, the pattern, the quality of moving fresh water over rock and gravel and mud is as old as rivers. Rivers have been running on this planet for more than 3 billion years. The first time liquid water gathered on the surface of the early Earth and began to flow downhill toward a lower point, the pattern was established. Water finds its way to the sea. It cuts through whatever holds it back. It runs and pulls and runs again. And somewhere in the dark, for the last 180 million years, a platypus has been there beside it. Not the same platypus, of course, but the lineage, the unbroken chain of generations, each one living its brief life of 20 years or so, diving and hunting and sleeping and breeding, passing the thread of existence forward to the next generation, and the next, and the next, across a span of time so long that the mind can hold it only in the most abstract way, as a number, as a word, as a feeling of deep time that settles somewhere in the chest and stays there. There is a particular quality to the dark of an Australian river at night. If you have ever been fortunate enough to be outside in a place with very little artificial light, you will have noticed something that is easy to forget in cities and towns. The dark is not empty. The dark is full of soft sounds. The water running, the wind in the leaves of the eucalyptus and the she-oak and the melaleuca along the bank, frogs calling from the margins of the river, the occasional flap and call of a waterbird disturbed from its roost. And above it all, if you lie on your back and let your eyes adjust, the southern sky filled with stars, more numerous than any northern hemisphere observer can quite imagine, the Milky Way arching overhead like a river of its own, mirroring the dark water below. This is the world the platypus inhabits. Not a quiet world, exactly, but a world of natural sound and natural dark, and the slow turning of the sky overhead. Researchers who work nights beside platypus rivers often describe a powerful sense of peace in that environment. The patience that the work requires, the long, still hours of watching and waiting, the willingness to let the river be what it is without imposing anything on it, tends to produce a particular quality of attention. You stop expecting things. You stop anticipating. You simply watch. And in that watching, something settles. Something that was slightly tense and slightly urgent in you quietly releases, and you become, for a few hours, simply a person sitting beside a river in the dark, grateful and attentive and still. The platypus does not know it is famous. It does not know that its image appears on currency, or that its genome has been read and studied by scientists in laboratories on other continents, or that its venom is the subject of pharmaceutical research, or that its glowing fur was discovered by researchers shining ultraviolet lights at museum specimens. It does not know that the first European scientists who examined it thought it was a hoax. It does not know that it caused a century of debate about mammalian classification. It does not know that children learn about it in schools. The documentary makers have spent weeks beside its rivers trying to film it. That conservation biologists have devoted their careers to understanding and protecting it. It does not know any of this, and it does not need to. The platypus knows what it needs to know. The feel of the river against its body. The electrical pulse of something moving beneath the surface of a pool. The depth of its burrow and the warmth inside it. The weight of 2 eggs pressed gently against its belly. The precise moment when the prey is close enough to catch. It knows the river it lives in, the way a musician knows a piece they have played for 20 years. Not consciously, not in words, but in the body. In muscle and reflex and a deep, practiced ease. And every night, as the darkness settles over Australia and the stars come out over the eucalyptus forests, a small brown animal slips out of its burrow and into its river, and begins, very quietly, to hunt. And the river runs. And the stars turn slowly overhead. And the world is, for a moment, exactly as it has always been. We do not fully understand how platypuses find mates. We do not fully understand their social structure, or whether they have one. We do not fully understand how they communicate, or whether they have forms of communication we have simply not yet detected. We do not know whether they navigate by magnetism. We do not know the full range of compounds in their milk and venom and what those compounds are doing. We do not know exactly how the electroreceptive system processes its signals into the kind of precise three-dimensional mapping that allows the animal to find a single larva tucked under a stone in complete darkness. We do not know what the experience of being a platypus is like. We do not know what the dark river feels like when you are moving through it, sensing the electrical signatures of living things, guided by a bill of extraordinary sensitivity, holding your breath, paddling through water that is cold and black and full of information. We do not know what the burrow feels like from the inside. The pressed earth walls, the smell of damp soil, the warmth of your own body, and the sound of the river running through the dark on the other side of the entrance. We do not know what it is like to sleep curled around 2 small leathery eggs, breathing slowly, keeping them warm with your own warmth, waiting in the dark for them to hatch. These are things that science may never fully reach. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps an animal this ancient, this particular, this quietly perfect in its own strange way, is allowed to keep some of its mystery. The echidna is the platypus's only living relative. When people think of the platypus's family, they sometimes imagine it as entirely alone in the world. And in many ways, it is. There is only one species of platypus. There has only ever been one species of platypus in the modern era. It has no close cousins, no nearby branches of the family tree it shares with another living mammal. Except one. The echidna, sometimes called the spiny anteater, is the other living monotreme. There are 4 living species of echidna, 3 in New Guinea and 1 found across both Australia and New Guinea. The echidna and the platypus look almost nothing alike. The echidna is covered in spines like a hedgehog, has a long tubular snout for probing inside ant and termite mounds, has no teeth at any stage of its life, and lives a primarily terrestrial existence. The platypus is sleek and furred and aquatic, with a rubbery sensing bill and webbed swimming feet, and a life centered on rivers and streams. And yet they share an ancestor. Somewhere back in the deep past, the lineage that would produce the platypus family and the lineage that would produce the echidna family were one. Scientists estimate the split between the 2 monotreme lineages occurred roughly 19 to 48 million years ago, though the exact timing remains a subject of ongoing debate and refinement. Before the echidna lineage developed its spines and its land-based lifestyle, its ancestors may have been semi-aquatic, something more like the platypus of today. The echidna, it is thought, may have evolved from a water-associated ancestor and moved increasingly toward land over millions of years, while the platypus lineage stayed in the water. 2 animals that look almost entirely different. Both laying eggs. Both nursing with milk secreted through skin. Both descended from ancestors that survived everything the planet has thrown at the mammal kingdom for the better part of 200 million years. They are very different, the platypus and the echidna, but they are, in the deepest sense of the word, family. The platypus was once more widespread than it is today. The fossil record, though incomplete for an animal that lived in wet environments where preservation is difficult, suggests that monotremes were once more diverse and more widely distributed than the small surviving group we see today. Fossil platypuses have been found in South America, dating from approximately 61 million years ago. This was during a time when Antarctica, South America, and Australia were still connected by land bridges, allowing animal populations to move between what are now separate continents. Ancient monotremes found in Australia include species that were significantly larger than the living platypus. One fossil species, given the name Obdurodon tharalcooschild after a figure from Aboriginal Australian stories, is estimated to have been about 1 meter long, roughly 3 times the size of the modern platypus. This giant platypus lived approximately 15 million years ago in what is now Queensland, in a world that looked very different from modern Australia. The continent was more forested, wetter, home to a diverse range of animals, including enormous wombat-like diprotodontids and strange predatory marsupials. As Australia dried out over the last 10 to 15 million years, as the great inland lakes and rivers shrank and disappeared, the larger and more water-dependent platypus relatives disappeared with them. The smaller, more adaptable ancestor of the modern platypus survived. It found the mountain rivers of the east. It found the cold, clear, permanent streams fed by rainfall on the Great Dividing Range. And there it settled, and refined, and stayed. The last remaining platypus, smaller than its ancestors, quieter, more perfectly fitted to the narrow band of habitat that remained, holding on at the edge of a drying continent, while everything else changed around it. Watching a platypus sleep is watching something very old be very still. Wildlife photographers who have managed to observe platypuses inside their burrows, through painstaking work with remote camera systems, describe the sleeping animal as remarkably compact. It curls into a tight ball, its bill tucked down against its chest, its tail wrapped around its body. The fur gives it an appearance of roundness, of softness, of a kind of sealed completeness. The breathing is slow and regular. The eyes move occasionally beneath their closed lids. Sometimes the bill sweeps, just slightly, and the front legs make a small swimming motion, and then the animal is still again. If this is dreaming, and we cannot say with certainty that it is, it seems to be gentle. Nothing startling. Nothing urgent. Just the slow play of something in the mind. Some trace of the night's hunting replaying quietly in the warm dark of the burrow. The platypus sleeps for 12 to 14 hours of every day. That is more than half its life spent in a state of deep rest, tucked into the earth beside its river, sealed away from the world. Perhaps this is part of what has kept the lineage going for so long. Not just the extraordinary sensory gifts, not just the reproductive strategy, not just the waterproof fur or the efficient metabolism. Perhaps it is, in part, the sleep. The long, unhurried, deeply restorative sleep of an animal that has learned when to be still and how to rest well, and why this matters. The night you are listening to this is one more night in a long series of nights. You have slept before, many thousands of times. You will sleep again, many thousands of times more. Sleep is one of the most fundamental things a body does, older than almost everything else we are as mammals. The ancestors of the platypus were sleeping in river burrows before the first dinosaur went extinct. The practice of rest, of shutting down the voluntary systems and letting the deeper processes do their work, is built into the fabric of life at a level so fundamental that we do not need to understand it to do it. We simply fall. The way the platypus falls, into the dark and the warmth and the quiet, into the place beyond thought and alertness and the demands of the waking world. Your burrow tonight is wherever you are resting. Your river is the slow sound of your own breathing. The darkness is not empty. It is full of rest and restoration and the slow, steady repair that your body performs every single night, without your asking it to. You are very good at this, even if it doesn't always feel that way. The body knows how to sleep. It has been practicing for a very long time. The platypus has survived 5 mass extinction events. Earth has experienced 5 major mass extinctions in its history, moments when the pace of species loss accelerated dramatically, when large fractions of the planet's living diversity vanished in what is, geologically speaking, a very short time. The most famous of these was the end Cretaceous extinction, roughly 66 million years ago, when an asteroid impact combined with intense volcanic activity caused the collapse of ecosystems worldwide and ended the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs. The Monotreme lineage survived this event. The platypus family, or at least the broader group of monotremes from which it descended, was present in the world during the Cretaceous. When the asteroid hit and the sky filled with dust and the global temperature crashed, whatever small, mammal-like creatures were then living on the land that would become Australia found a way through. We do not know exactly how. Perhaps their semi-aquatic habits were protective. Rivers, which have their own thermal stability and their own food sources in detritus and invertebrates, may have buffered the effects of the global catastrophe somewhat. Perhaps their low energy requirements and their ability to go long periods without food helped. Perhaps it was simply chance. The random luck of being in the right place at the right time, combined with a suite of traits flexible enough to handle an unprecedented disruption. But they survived. And then they continued. Through the warm Paleocene, when mammals diversified explosively to fill the ecological space left by the dinosaurs. Through the Eocene and Oligocene and Miocene, as Australia slowly drifted north, drying out, its vegetation changing from dense rainforest to the open sclerophyll woodland of today. Through all of this, the platypus's ancestors were in the rivers. Smaller and smaller, more and more specialized, more and more precisely fitted to the particular rivers that remained. Until today, when one of them slips into a cold, dark river on an April night and begins to hunt by electricity in the same way its ancestors hunted 66 million years ago. There is a quality of attention that the platypus inspires, that is different from the attention most animals inspire. Most animals we know well inspire feelings we recognize. The dog inspires warmth and companionship. The bird inspires the kind of pleasure that comes from watching something light and mobile and free. The whale inspires awe and a sense of scale. The spider inspires, for many people, a visceral and immediate unease. The platypus inspires something harder to name. Part of it is wonder, simple and clear, the delight of encountering something genuinely surprising. Part of it is a kind of affectionate bewilderment, the way you might feel about a person whose logic you cannot entirely follow, but whose results you cannot argue with. Part of it is something deeper, a feeling of being in the presence of time, of standing at the edge of something that has been running for so long, so quietly, so without pause or commentary, that simply knowing it exists adjusts your sense of how large the world is and how much of it we do not see. The platypus does not know that it is a marvel. It does not experience itself as unusual. To itself, it is simply what it is. The river is familiar. The bill knows what it is looking for. The burrow is warm. The night is long and full of food. This, perhaps, is what we are really resting in when we let the platypus carry us towards sleep. Not just the biological facts, remarkable as they are, but the feeling of something at ease in its own existence. Something that does not strain or reach or explain itself. Something that simply is, completely and without apology, exactly what it is. The echidna is the platypus's only living relative. When people think of the platypus's family, they sometimes imagine it as entirely alone in the world. And in many ways it is. There is only one species of platypus. There has only ever been one species of platypus in the modern era. It has no close cousins, no nearby branches of the family tree it shares with another living mammal. Except one. The echidna, sometimes called the spiny anteater, is the other living monotreme. There are 4 living species of echidna, 3 in New Guinea and 1 found across both Australia and New Guinea. The echidna and the platypus look almost nothing alike. The echidna is covered in spines, has a long tubular snout for probing inside ant and termite mounds, has no teeth at any stage of its life, and lives a primarily terrestrial existence. The platypus is sleek and furred and aquatic, with a rubbery sensing bill and webbed swimming feet and a life centered on rivers and streams. And yet they share an ancestor. Somewhere back in the deep past, the lineage that would produce the platypus family and the lineage that would produce the echidna family were one. Scientists estimate the split between the 2 monotreme lineages occurred roughly 19 to 48 million years ago, though the exact timing remains a subject of ongoing debate and refinement. Before the echidna lineage developed its spines and its land-based lifestyle, its ancestors may have been semi-aquatic, something more like the platypus of today. The echidna, it is thought, may have evolved from a water-associated ancestor and moved increasingly toward land over millions of years, while the platypus lineage stayed in the water. 2 animals that look almost entirely different. Both laying eggs, both nursing with milk secreted through skin, both descended from ancestors that survived everything the planet has thrown at the mammal kingdom for the better part of 200 million years. They are very different, the platypus and the echidna, but they are, in the deepest sense of the word, family. The rivers of Australia are some of the oldest river systems on Earth. Australia is the oldest, flattest, and driest inhabited continent. Its ancient geology, eroded over hundreds of millions of years with no major mountain building events in recent geological time, has produced a landscape that is in many ways unlike any other on the planet. The rivers that flow through this landscape are not young, fast-cutting rivers carving new channels through fresh rock. Many of them follow paths that have been stable for tens of millions of years. Their valleys were already ancient when the platypus's ancestors first began slipping into them. The Yarra River catchment in Victoria, one of the platypus's key habitats near Melbourne, follows a drainage pattern that has been in place for somewhere around 30 to 40 million years. The Murray-Darling Basin, the vast inland drainage system that covers much of southeastern Australia, has an even older history. Its broad river plains laid down over geological periods that stretch back well before the appearance of modern mammals. When a platypus navigates a particular bend in a river it has known all its life, it is moving through a landscape shaped by geological processes that were already old when its lineage was young. This is the context in which the platypus has always existed. Not a new world of rapid change and geological freshness, but an ancient, settled, deeply worn landscape that has been finding its own equilibrium for longer than most of the world's mountain ranges have existed. The platypus fits this landscape. It belongs to it in a way that feels complete, the way a hand fits a glove made for it, or the way a word fits a thought that has been waiting to be spoken. We have sat together at the water's edge and watched something extraordinary slip beneath the surface. We have followed an animal whose story stretches back further than almost anything else alive on land today. We have learned about its bill that senses electricity, its eggs wrapped in leathery shells, its milk that seeps through skin, its venom that defies painkillers, its genome that rewrites the rules of mammalian biology. We have sat with the strangeness of an animal that made scientists reach for scissors. We have thought about rivers running through ancient forests, about 65,000 years of human knowledge accumulated beside those rivers, about the quiet persistence of a creature that simply continued being what it was, through ice ages and extinctions and the slow drift of continents. We have thought about sleep, the platypus asleep in its burrow, twitching its bill in the dark, perhaps following something small and electric through the water of a dream. And now it is your turn. Let the image of that dark Australian river settle around you. Imagine the sound of water moving over stone. Imagine the smell of damp earth and cold air and eucalyptus. Imagine the surface of the river at night, perfectly still in the pools between the riffles, the stars reflected in it, rippling just slightly in the current. And somewhere beneath the surface, moving in absolute silence, guided by senses we are only beginning to understand, a small and extraordinary animal, going about its ancient, unhurried life. It does not know it is extraordinary. It is simply there, in its river, in its night, in the world that has always held it, doing exactly what it has always done. And that, perhaps, is the most restful thing of all. Let your breath slow now. Let your body feel heavy and warm. Let the questions and the thoughts and the small worries of the day drift away like ripples on a dark river, widening, softening, fading, until there is only still water and silence and the deep, unhurried peace of sleep. If you are still awake, there is another video waiting gently for you whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are growing heavy, as I hope they are, let them close. Let the river hold you. Let the dark and the quiet carry you into whatever rest your body needs. Good night. Sleep well. And thank you, as always, for spending this quiet time here at Sleepy Science.